Discover the amazing transformative journey of Odysseus, 10 surprising lessons revealed. Jake stared at the classroom door, every tick of the clock sharpening the weight on his chest. The walls, adorned with timelines and maps, felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. He devoted long hours to teaching history, believing deeply in its power to inspire. Yet each day spent fighting for attention amidst illusions of standardized scores made him feel like a lone sailor adrift. Would any of his students remember the passion he poured into lesson plans, thick with stories of valor and struggle? Or would they leave his class, numb to the beauty he tried to convey, destined to measure worth by grades alone? Today, the pressure felt particularly acute. The school board was tightening its grip, foisting another report on the need for quantifiable success. What did numbers mean against the whispers of history? They turned his heart heavy. Perhaps he was like Odysseus, lost among waves of financial constraints and bureaucratic indifference, longing for that one decision to guide him home. The lure of a corporate job loomed dangerously. Images of financial stability flickered in his mind like a lighthouse, yet he feared the cost, his dedication, his integrity. Jake rifled through the letters he had taken from his grandfather's old cottage. Pages yellowed with age told tales of courage and sacrifice, yet they resonated with an unsettling solitude. The more he read, the deeper his longing for connection grew, and in this rich tapestry of family history, he recognized his own struggle, a fight for autonomy in a world that dictated what mattered. Was security worth sacrificing his passion? The question sliced through him, sharper than any blade. Before he could fully grapple with the swirling turmoil in his mind, he broke from his looping thoughts. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A quiet little murmur echoed back to him, emerging from Lily, a student he hadn't expected to shine. Inspired by his lessons, she had crafted a project that held within it the essence of bravery and resilience, fueled not only by his teachings, but also by the indomitable spirit of his grandfather. Suddenly, Jake felt the flickering hope rise. Maybe her success could ignite a flame. But alongside this spark came a terrifying doubt. Would her recognition be enough to change the insatiable appetite of the system? As he wrestled his own inadequacies, the weight of the board's expectations felt suffocating. He pictured himself standing before the panel, words jumbled, the fear coiling tighter. What if they dismissed her work as a fluke? What if he faltered and let them extinguish the light she was building? The breath in his lungs began to feel shallow, desperation tightening around him like a noose. Should he play it safe, submit quietly, resign to a life defined by numbers, or gamble everything for a chance to ignite a genuine change? The looming decision hung over him like an ominous storm cloud, dark and heavy with doubt. Jake's heart raced as he approached the school board meeting, unsure if today would mark the beginning of hope or merely another chapter of disappointment. Would he risk it all or turn back into the safety of shadows? The air in the boardroom felt thick and stifling as Jake stepped inside, his pulse echoing in his ears. Rows of stern faces greeted him, each one a reminder of the expectation weighing him down. He could hear whispers, speculation about the latest report, the red ink circling every curve and crevice of his teaching methods. However, beneath the surface of anxiety, a current of determination surged. He needed to speak for those who couldn't. He positioned himself at the front and clutched his notes tight enough that knuckles turned white. One glance toward Lily's project, carefully displayed on the easel behind him, anchored him momentarily. It served as a representation of everything he had fought to uphold. In that instant, he made a choice. He would speak not just for the data, but for the pulse of humanity ingrained in lessons of history. "Thank you for allowing me this opportunity," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "Today, I stand before you not solely as a teacher, but as an advocate for inspiration. I believe education is about more than scores. It's about igniting passion." The room held its breath, the board members scrutinizing him. Jake pressed on, drawing strength from his conviction and the spirit of his grandfather. For example, Lily's project, her exploration of bravery and her connection to narratives of the past. That is history. It inspires. It connects. As each word slipped from his mouth, he felt freedom and clarity. The passion that had burned in secret now blazed forth like a beacon, illuminating what he'd almost abandoned. Yet, a voice from the board pierced through his budding confidence, a cold query filled with skepticism. "That's all well and good, Jake, but how does that translate into measurable results? We need numbers, not stories." The question sliced through him, reminding him of the very fears that had fueled his doubts. The struggle within him fluctuated between anger and despair. He opened his mouth, but no words came. In that paralyzing moment, the shadows of financial security loomed, tempting, yet suffocating. Then memories of his grandfather flickered in his mind, tales of resilience, stories that transformed lives rather than merely shifted metrics. Summoning his resolve, Jake shifted his approach. "What if I told you that creating this connection could yield even stronger results? Students who are passionate about what they learn tend to excel academically. It's about building a meaningful foundation." As the murmurs rippled among the board members, uncertainty washed over him. This wasn't merely about numbers, it was about a legacy. The battle between preserving his integrity and securing financial stability played out in vivid colors around him. He looked at Lily, whose eyes sparkled with the promise of the future. If he leaned into vulnerability, maybe they could build a new standard, rooted in inspiration rather than mere metrics. The restless thought ignited within him, driving his next decision. With every ounce of courage, Jake pressed on. "I understand the need for results, but perhaps it's time we redefine what those results look like." A silence fell. Jake could feel the weight of possibility. The tension of the moment coiled and ready to release. Then a voice spoke from the far end of the room, a voice he hadn't expected. It was Miss Granger, a member known for her traditional views. "What you propose is unorthodox, Jake, but if you believe it can work, I'd like to explore this further." Jake's heart raced anew as a flicker of hope ignited within him. He knew this conversation could change everything. As Miss Granger's gaze fixed upon him, he recognized the opportunity at hand, an invitation to innovate, to shift the very paradigm of education. Things were changing, but were they changing enough? The moment stretched, brimming with unrealized potential. Would he sink into the comfort of their compliance, or would he steer toward uncharted waters, risking it all to reach a greater horizon? As the weight of that question settled upon him, he felt its urgency ignite the core of his being, uncertain of where he would land next. The path ahead remained shrouded in shadow, each choice suspended in the air like an unsung note waiting for its resolution. The buzz of conversation resumed in the boardroom, but Jake's mind was far away in the realm of possibility. Curiosity mixed with a fierce glimmer of determination as Miss Granger's unexpected support echoed in his thoughts. What began as a daunting challenge now felt like the ignition of change. He needed to grasp this moment, navigate it carefully, and mold it into something revolutionary. As he left the boardroom, pulsating with adrenaline, he couldn't help but reflect on the intricacies of where he stood. He had a rare chance to challenge historical educational norms. The palpable tension from the meeting began to dissolve into excitement, but uncertainty lingered, like a shadow cast by the light of hope. He decided that confronting these emotions head-on was essential. Walking down the hallway, Jake replayed the board's reactions in his mind, dissecting the impressions and sentiments that had materialized during his presentation. He was filled with ideas, each one bubbling with potential. However, a primal fear clawed at him. What if Miss Granger's support faltered once they moved past this moment? How could he ensure that inspiration was more than just an abstract concept to those who operated under hard metrics? Jake entered his classroom and was immediately greeted by a wave of voices and laughter. Students, bright and full of curiosity, filled the space with energy. Just moments ago, he was battling the doubt in that boardroom, but now he felt their raw enthusiasm buoying him. Their dreams, their connections to history, pulsed with a reality that was intimately profound. "Let's address today's lesson," he called, calling the classroom to order. As his students settled, he noticed Lily diligently working at her desk, glancing up occasionally, perhaps sensing the change within him. He took a deep breath, allowing the moments from the boardroom to settle into a motivating force, a background score to his day. Today, we're diving deeper into not just who made history, but why their stories matter, he began, improvising, letting the passion spill from his heart. There was a spark as connections formed in their eyes, the way he had hoped they would. Jake challenged them to delve into history from an emotional perspective, asking them to consider deeply how bravery shaped narratives. "What would you say to someone who didn't believe bravery is important in our stories?" he prodded. Of course, they pushed back, arguing passionately as students often do. Their questions were sharp, filled with budding intellect and burgeoning confidence. Each dialogue was a step toward redefining his sense of purpose. This was not only about teaching them facts, but teaching them to feel and engage. As the class concluded, Jake felt a spark of understanding solidify in his chest. He saw how far inspiration could stretch, how it could influence behavior beyond mere grades on a page. He realized this was precisely what he needed to communicate to the administrative board, not just during formal gatherings, but through the daily interactions with his students. Their reaction to genuine engagement and passion was the real measure of success. Stepping out of the classroom, Jake sought to connect with Miss Granger. Would she be willing to explore innovative educational methods further? The board needed a pilot program grounded in real student experiences. Could he shape something together that transformed their perceptions? This was the moment he recognized a larger mission beyond himself, to bridge the gap between tradition and evolution in education. But was that ambition enough to silence the looming voices that prioritized numbers over hearts? As he approached Miss Granger's office, anticipation surged. The door was partially ajar, and he caught snippets of conversation. He hesitated, feeling a rush of unease wash over him. Would they dismiss his vision? Would the support he had felt moments fleetingly into existence stand up to scrutiny? Yet one thought anchored him. The time to face the uncertainty was now. Taking a deep breath, he resolved to persist. He opened the door, ready to confront whatever awaited him. Inside, words lingered in the air like uncharted whispers, echoing the possibilities of what could be. Would his commitment to inspiring change catalyze a movement, the likes of which had never been charted in education's vast history? Jake felt a tremor of uncertainty as he entered Miss Granger's office, but also a burgeoning excitement coursing through him. The room was imbued with the weight of ideas being tossed around like balls in a heated debate, each one a potential catalyst for change. He focused on Miss Granger, her sharp eyes revealing a mixture of intrigue and caution. Jake couldn't help but wonder if she saw in him what he was desperately trying to express, a vision far beyond what his colleagues had previously entertained. "Jake," she acknowledged, motioning for him to sit. The room grew quieter, the gentle hum of conversation dissipating as he settled into the chair opposite her. "We were just discussing the broader implications of your proposal on educational reform. It's a bold move." Bold. The word reverberated through his mind. It was both a compliment and a challenge. I believe we can redefine how students interact with history, make it visceral, personal, he started, carefully weighing his words. He leaned in, driven by the powerful sense of responsibility this moment held. If we can teach them to see themselves in the stories we tell, we can empower them. Miss Granger's brow furrowed slightly. Her fingers steepled under her chin as she considered his words. But, Jake, you must also remember that we're at the mercy of numbers. Metrics drive funding, and funding drives programs. How do you plan to align passion with measurable outcomes? Her question sliced through his enthusiasm like a knife. He hadn't fully established a way to quantify what he envisioned. The idea felt more ethereal than concrete. Doubt began to seep into his confidence. He took a deep breath, determined not to let it cloud his resolve. We can create a feedback system, student reflections, engagement surveys, even parent involvement metrics. We'll gather qualitative data alongside traditional assessments. It tells a fuller story. There was a moment of silence as the weight of his response settled. She seemed intrigued, her expression softening. That's not an insignificant approach, Jake. However, she paused, tightening the line between them with her careful tone. You need to rally support from the board, and they're not always so quick to embrace change. Then let's showcase small victories, he suggested, his determination rising like a tide. I can run pilot sessions that emphasize emotional engagement and innovative assessments. If we can demonstrate success at a smaller scale, they may be more inclined to adapt. Ambitious, Miss Granger observed, a spark of interest igniting her gaze. Yet the flicker of apprehension remained, hinting that persuasion wasn't guaranteed. Her skepticism was a challenge, a reminder that the path he wished to take was littered with hurdles he'd have to leap over. Nevertheless, he felt ironclad focus crystallizing within him. His students deserved this fight, and he wouldn't fear to deter him. Consider scheduling a presentation at the upcoming board meeting, she suggested, a dash of support shining through her careful facade. Prepare a concise outline of your initiative, your methods, and how you can quantify success. Thank you, he replied, a surge of adrenaline pushing him forward. I won't let you down. As he exited her office, a new urgency gripped him. He needed to synthesize everything he had learned and prepare a compelling narrative that illustrated the transformative potential of empathy in education. Jake was acutely aware that he was no longer just an educator. He had become a crusader for change, a bridge between antiquated measures and a more humane approach to learning. Each step down the hallway felt like marching toward a pivotal battleground, one where he would articulate his beliefs against the cold mechanics of the board. Doubt still lingered, but determination overpowered it. He could picture the meeting, the faces around the long table, their expressions ranging from skepticism to curiosity. Would they see the spark of his vision? Would they dare to embrace the radical shift he intended to propose? But one nagging thought haunted him. If he succeeded in convincing them, would the enthusiasm of his students still resonate within those sterile walls? The reality of institutional rigidity loomed ahead. Jake hastened his pace, driven by purpose. The next steps felt enormous, a synthesis of personal growth, scholarly determination, and the gamble of stepping outside the norms he had always accepted. He planned to reveal a bold direction, but questioned if it would resonate as profoundly with the board. Would they lean into innovation, or would they be tethered to the familiar? And as he embraced the pulse of uncertainty that lay ahead, a singular thought surged forth. This was the moment to redefine what it meant to inspire youth by illuminating hearts alongside minds, forever shifting the paradigm of education. Would they open their arms to that possibility? Jake plunged into a whirlwind of preparation as soon as he returned to his classroom. The air buzzed with potential. Each lesson plan he rifled through melded with his newfound conviction. Students filed in, lively chatter filling the room, but he found it difficult to focus on their conversations. His mind was racing ahead, envisioning how to transform his teachings into compelling narratives. His first task was to curate stories that wouldn't just inform, but ignite passion. He needed to unearth historical events that resonated on a deeply personal level. He rummaged through textbooks, scouring for tales of struggle, triumph, and humanity. What would resonate? What would make a seventh grader's heart race? With each story he considered, Jake scribbled notes filled with heartfelt moments. Empathy was the cornerstone upon which his approach would hinge. Yet in the back of his mind, a voice of doubt resided. Could he break away from the curriculum norms? Could he truly shape their perceptions? He recalled the skepticism in Miss Granger's eyes, a reminder that change was rarely welcomed without resistance. The board was staunch in their views, and while his passion surged like a tidal wave, he sensed the risk of crashing against rigid expectations. As the students settled, Jake decided to delve deep into the plans for their next project, a collaborative presentation on historical figures who inspired change. He framed the assignment around narrative empathy, encouraging students to relate their selected figures' experiences to their own lives. Would they find value in weaving emotional connections? He took a breath and revealed his vision. I want us to explore not just what these figures did, but the emotions that propelled them. The room gained a hushed anticipation. By understanding their struggles, we can find parallels in our own lives. Their faces morphed from confusion to intrigue as he animatedly shared personal anecdotes about the historical figures. The stories resonated with Jake, each eruption of laughter or gasp of shock from the students signaling that connection. As he captured their attention, a profound new confidence blossomed within him. Perhaps this was how he could bridge the gap between the board's metrics and genuine student engagement. Homework transformed into listening to their chosen historical narrative at home, encouraging them to reflect on their feelings. Jake peppered the assignments with questions surrounding the emotional experiences of these figures. How did they overcome their challenges? What choices did they face? Which moments sparked their resolve? That evening, as he became lost in planning for the upcoming board meeting, a revelation struck him, a thought he had unwittingly skirted around. This was a collaborative effort. The students' enthusiasm would be crucial in illustrating the success of his initiative. He imagined their reactions and responses during the board meeting, the brightness in their eyes when discussing the lessons they had learned. But that night, as he stared at the empty screen before him, anxiety crept into his thoughts. What if his efforts fell flat? Would the stories resonate with the board the way they did in his classroom? He clenched his jaw, rewriting sections of his presentation over and over, focusing on how to frame their experiences as tangible successes, evidence of how a different approach could yield not just numbers, but sparked imaginations. Automatically, he veered between excitement and trepidation. The divide between the compassionate educator he aspired to be and the metrics-driven expectations of the board clashed violently in his mind. This presentation would not only determine the future of his project, it would set a precedent for the school's approach to education. By midnight, with the hum of the quiet house surrounding him, Jake felt a simmering clarity rise above uncertainty. Armed with the knowledge that every epic journey begins with a story of transformation, he finalized his project outline, daring to believe in the possibility of change. As he powered down his computer, the tension of the upcoming presentation loomed large. This was more than securing support. It was Jake's moment to push back against institutional inertia, to amplify the voices of his students, and to prove that education could transcend mere numbers. But within that swirling mix of hope and fear, one truth remained fixed. The real test wasn't merely convincing the board. It was ensuring each student's narrative resonated deeply, unearthing not just awareness, but inspiration. The stakes were rising. The board meeting was fast approaching, and he knew all too well this moment would define what it meant to truly connect history to life. As he dreamed of their potential reaction, he understood the undeniable truth. He was ready to embark on his own transformative journey, but the outcome would be anything but certain. Would the board's response usher in a revolution or cast him back into doubt? The morning of the board meeting dawned with a heavy veil of anticipation. As Jake stood in front of the mirror, he took a moment to analyze his reflection. The dark circles under his eyes looked more pronounced than usual, a reminder of the sleepless nights that had led to this moment. Today was pivotal, not for the board or the curriculum alone, but for his vision of what education could be. In the classroom, the atmosphere buzzed with an electrifying mix of excitement and anxiety. Students were gathered around their desks, chatting animatedly about the historical figures they had embraced. Jake felt an unmistakable warmth surge within him, igniting a spark of determination. This, he thought, was what education should feel like: active, engaged, and alive. "Today's the day we share our stories," Jake announced as he walked to the front of the class, his heart racing. The students quieted down, anticipation painting their faces. "I want you all to remember that what you've discovered isn't just facts. It's the emotions that connect us to our past and shape our future." As he called on students one by one to present their projects, he found himself deeply moved by their insights. Each presentation was a reflection of their understanding, woven with personal connections that brought tears to his eyes. The story of Rosa Parks igniting change with her courageous stand resonated strongly with Kelly, who spoke about standing up against bullying. Jack shared how Nelson Mandela's resilience inspired him to persevere through the challenges of his own family circumstances. Every moment in that room felt like a small victory. Jake noticed his confidence building with each student's narrative, reinforcing the essence of his mission. When the final presentation ended, the classroom erupted in applause, their energy infectious. He witnessed firsthand the transformative power of storytelling, one that engaged hearts, sparked empathy, and bridged generations. After the bell rang, Jake gathered the students together. "You've all done an incredible job. I want you to carry this passion with you when we present to the board." Their nods of enthusiasm filled him with reassurance. Yet, deep inside, an undercurrent of doubt persisted. Could he translate this palpable energy into a compelling narrative for the board? As he walked to the conference room, Jake's mind churned with strategies. He envisioned tailoring each student's presentation to connect the broader implications of their stories to educational outcomes. He noted how empathy fostered an environment for self-discovery, and how their excitement could illustrate the impact of imaginative teaching methods. Upon entering the boardroom, the formal atmosphere clashed with his vibrant classroom. Executives sat poised, armed with metrics and mouthing skepticism. Jake took a deep breath, grounding himself in the stories that had ignited the students' passions. He began by sharing snippets from the students' presentations, threading their narratives with data, how engagement translated into improved performance, fostering a love for learning that the board valued. But with each passing minute, he sensed their disinterest. Their expressions remained unyielding, a stark contrast to the enthusiasm he had witnessed earlier. Could he reach them? A flicker of doubt threatened to consume him, but then he remembered the laughter and insights from his classroom. It dawned on him that he needed to confront that rigidity head-on. "Teaching isn't just about information," Jake pressed, passion igniting his voice. "It's about connection, about creating an environment where students feel seen and heard. The figures we've explored face daunting challenges, and their stories have inspired my students to find their own voices in adversity." As he continued, a shift occurred in the room. The board members leaned forward, absorbing his fervor. He could feel the tide of their perceptions starting to turn. Jake harnessed that urgency, concluding by inviting a few students to deliver their key takeaways. This was it, he thought, his chance to bring their voices alive as he had envisioned. The moment felt pivotal, and he realized that the real challenge lay ahead. Would he manage to dismantle the wall of institutional doubt and embrace the transformative potential he saw in education? As he watched the reactions in the room, he sensed an unsettled tension in the air, a mixture of possibilities waiting to unfold. But a lingering fear returned. What if they remained resistant to change? The moment of confrontation with the board was here, and with it came the looming question: was he prepared to defend not just an educational approach, but the very essence of what it meant to inspire? As the board members exchanged glances, marking the end of Jake's presentation, he felt a rush of adrenaline course through him. The silence that ensued felt thick, like fog hanging heavily in the air. He had laid his heart bare, presenting not just data, but a clear vision of what he believed education should strive for. But now, facing their censure, doubt crept back in. Would it be enough? Mr. Atkinson, the board chairperson, cleared his throat and proceeded to speak. "Thank you, Jake. While your passion is commendable, we are primarily interested in results. What metrics can you provide to ensure these results translate into favorable outcomes across the entire district?" The words struck him like a gut punch. Those numbers, those cold metrics, seemed like shackles, limiting the potential he felt radiating from the hearts of his students. He had come prepared to show how engagement could drive success, but suddenly the request felt overwhelming. How could he neatly package stories of personal triumph within the confines of quantifiable data? Panic flickered in his mind as he proposed a seemingly haphazard connection between emotions and academic success. It wasn't enough. "I understand," Jake began, timing his words carefully, "that we need measurable outcomes. However, these outcomes start with connection. A child who feels seen is one who will engage, who will work harder." He glanced at the students who had come to support him, their eyes filled with hope but also uncertainty. Jake's resolve hardened. He recalled the resilience his students displayed in sharing their stories and how they had found strength in themselves. He needed to encapsulate that essence into a narrative the board could not ignore. "Imagine a school where empathy creates unwavering motivation," he pushed, heart racing, voice steadying. "We should be creating environments where students thrive, realize their strengths, and feel inspired to be active participants in their education." Jake's words hung in the air, a delicate balance of defiance and conviction. He could see a few board members shift, a slight raise of eyebrows, a glance exchanged. Perhaps he was starting to breach their stoicism. But Mr. Atkinson's glare was unyielding. "What evidence do you have that this approach leads to measurable success, Jake?" His mind raced. The doting smiles of the students, their laughter echoing in his ears, revealed their unwavering trust in him as their mentor. "What if," he said, suddenly struck by an idea, "we invite parents to share their observations? What if we survey students on how they feel about their learning experience? Those sentiments could be the foundation of this success we're in search of." Mr. Atkinson was silent, appearing to weigh the proposition against a mental ledger of data points. The climate in the room felt almost electric, charged with anticipation. Jake knew he was teetering on the edge of a breakthrough or total collapse. "Would you consider a pilot program?" Jake suggested, his voice growing both daring and hopeful. "We can track our students' progress and engagement throughout the year. Let's measure not only academic results, but personal growth, resilience, and empathy." As the board deliberated quietly, Jake felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He was no longer just a teacher advocating change. He was a bridge between traditional views and innovative methods, ready to create avenues where empathy could be measured just as much as math scores. Mr. Atkinson raised an eyebrow. "We may need to develop parameters for that. It might take time before we can see tangible results," he replied, slowly, in a tone that almost sounded conciliatory. "Time, Mr. Atkinson, is what we need to foster real change," Jake replied, firm in his stance. "Together, we can redefine success." With the board still mulling over Jake's proposal, the room teemed. Yet, beneath his burgeoning hope, insecurities bubbled up. Could they see the merit in his vision? With every passing moment, the stakes climbed higher. He had opened the door to a possibility, but questioned whether he could truly walk through it. As the board members shifted into discussion, Jake's thoughts raced. He had taken the leap, but would they follow? The time had come to face the ultimate challenge. Could he transform their skepticism into belief, or would this encounter extinguish the spark he had ignited in his classroom? Jake shifted in his seat as the murmurs of the board members intensified. He could feel every beat of his heart synchronizing with the rhythm of his breath. The very air crackled with tension, transforming it into a battlefield, his ideals clashing against the cold reality of established metrics. Eyes darted from one board member to another, each considering the validity of his proposal. Was he persuasive enough? Would they see not just numbers, but a vision? As uncertainty threatened to seep into his resolve, Jake recalled the quiet moments spent with his students, those late afternoons when they opened up about dreams, fears, and the lives they wished to lead. They deserved a champion, someone who would risk everything for their voices to be heard. The thought galvanized him, drawing a newfound determination from deep within. Drawing upon this radiant strength, Jake meticulously crafted his next words, willing them to resonate. What if we viewed this not as a cost, but as an investment? If we foster emotional intelligence, aren't we equipping our students with the skills they will carry far beyond our classrooms? What if a child feels valued and, in turn, motivates a classmate? The ripple effects could be profound. The shifting board members seemed to absorb his sentiment, albeit gradually. He reminded himself of their names, their backgrounds, all the things that made them human. They weren't enemies, they were stakeholders, just as passionate about student success, albeit through a different lens. He needed to create a connection, to ignite a sense of collaboration. The deliberation continued, but Jake's instinct urged him to press on. Let's partner with local universities, enlist volunteers in the community to help mentor our students, creating a sustainable support system. Picture a community that thrives on collective investment in student empathy, resilience, and engagement. Let it not just be a proposal, but a legacy. Suddenly, a faint sense of hope flickered within him. Perhaps his framing would resonate. Perhaps the abstract concepts he championed would begin to take shape in their minds as tangible realities. Yet, doubt dared to gnaw at the edges of his thoughts. What if they reject it? Would he have failed, not just for himself, but for the students waiting for change? The students who invested their trust in him? With every moment that passed, he realized he was teetering on the brink of a significant transformation, not just for the students, but also for himself. To be prepared for both outcomes. If they rejected his ideas, it didn't have to be the end. It could merely be a setback, another opportunity to fine-tune his approach. Unable to still the noise of conflicting emotions, Jake took a deep breath, anchoring himself to his core values. The worst possible outcome was stasis, where students continued to languish in a system that didn't nurture holistic growth. He wouldn't allow fear to manifest as inaction. If the board turned him down, it would only galvanize him further to seek innovative ways to push the envelope. Finally, Mr. Atkinson broke the silence, casting a scrutinizing gaze over Jake. "Your passion is evident, Jake, but passion alone won't sway our decision. We need a pragmatic approach. Where is the data?" As the eyes of the board members settled on him once more, Jake felt a mixture of dread and exhilaration swell within him. This was crunch time, a crucible moment that would shape not only his career, but also the fate of the students he cherished. "Let me take a step back," he said, keenly aware of the stakes. "If the traditional metrics cannot encapsulate the change we aspire to see, maybe it is time we redefine what success truly means, something that integrates heart alongside academic rigor." In that moment, a spark ignited within him, illuminating the path forward. He realized that he would seek his own data, in the resilience of his students, in their evolving narratives, and in the tides of change he longed to bring forth. But with those realignments came urgency. He needed to act swiftly before the shifting sands of the discussion formed walls rather than bridges. What he hadn't realized before was that the risks inherent in challenging conventional wisdom were precisely what made this journey necessary. Would he muster the courage to stake everything on a transformative vision? Or would he retreat from the precipice, surrendering to familiar constraints? The choice loomed over him as the discussion continued, an embodiment of his own crossroads in life, waiting for resolution. Would he emerge as the architect of change, or would he remain a spectator in the arena of his dreams? With the weight of anticipation heavy in the air, the next pivotal decision hung just beyond reach, fluttering like the pages of a book yearning to be opened. Jake felt time slow down as the eyes of the board members bore into him, each gaze scrutinizing, weighing his worth and ideas. The tension felt palpable, a living entity that wrapped itself around him, pressing on his chest. He sensed the gravity of what lay ahead. There was no retreat now. He had to charge forward. "Data," he echoed, the word a bitter taste on his tongue. But this moment reminded him of every time one of his students hesitated to share their work. They too needed to redefine success, to transform the way their potential was judged. What if he could use this as a catalyst to ignite a conversation, not just about hard data, but about the very essence of learning? "I agree. Data is essential," Jake replied, adjusting his posture and reclaiming his presence in the room. "Data on test scores can show academic performance, but they cannot quantify growth in empathy, resilience, and real preparation for life beyond school walls. What I propose is not just reliant on metrics, but is an organic, transformative process." He took a moment, gauging their reactions. Some nodding heads indicated that the idea was beginning to sink in, while others remained skeptical. It was a delicate balance he needed to maintain, a balance between passion and cold statistics, between transformation and pragmatism. "Imagine a student whose simplified success is measured solely by grades," he continued, determined to push the boundaries. "They may excel academically, but lack the essential skills to navigate the world effectively. Conversely, a student who struggles with traditional metrics may possess extraordinary talents, be it in the arts, communication, or leadership. Our current model inadvertently sidelines them." As his words flowed, the tension shifted slightly. He could feel the inertia of their thoughts beginning to overcome the initial resistance. With every conviction he expressed, he forged a little more connection. Whether through an act of rebellion or discovery, Jake sensed that he was tapping into a collective yearning for reassessment and growth. Yet, lurking beneath his persuasive dialogue was an internal struggle. What would it mean to redefine success, not just for his students, but for himself? The realization struck him. He could no longer afford to measure his worth by others' narrow perspectives. He needed to embrace the full spectrum of his own evolution, his ability to challenge norms and stand firm in his convictions. "Let's remix our approach," Jake proposed, channeling the unyielding spirit of his students. "Rather than presenting them as specific figures in a spreadsheet, let's create a portfolio-based assessment opportunity. This would not only highlight progressive accomplishments, but could also foster creativity, critical thinking, and a sense of belonging. We can gather narratives from students themselves, weaving together their individual stories as a testament to their growth." The board members exchanged glances. Curiosity sparked in a few eyes, an invitation to consider a fresh perspective. But there remained the glaring question: would they embrace it? Jake, there's merit in what you're proposing. However, the implementation would require significant shifts in curriculum standards and training for educators, Miss Eldridge said, her tone a blend of encouragement and caution. That's no small feat. He felt the weight of doubt resurrect itself. But what choice did he have? He was standing at a precipice, the chance to pivot toward genuine transformation inching closer. If we believe that our goal is fundamentally about nurturing capable lifelong learners, shouldn't we fight, however daunting the challenge, to make those changes? He pressed. The room fell silent, and for a fleeting moment, Jake felt exposed. The collective uncertainty trembled in the ambient air, but he also recognized something powerful. He was advocating more than just a proposal. He was championing a vision that fundamentally changed lives. His heart raced as the stakes of the moment clenched tighter. What if they dismissed him again? What if doubts rose to thwart his efforts? Yet, wrapped around that fear was an exhilarating thread of possibility. This was not just about the board approving a new initiative. It was about his own transformational journey, realizing his capacity to speak truth to power, to hold the vision he so desperately wanted to fight for. Just then, a quiet voice broke through the silence. "But what if nobody agrees with you?" Jake turned to see Mindy, one of the newer board members, looking unsure, yet inquisitive. The question hung in the air like an unresolved tension. It was a moment of vulnerability, one that mirrored the questions he had about his journey. "What if one voice sparkles like a lantern in the night?" Jake countered, aware that the room held his answer. The moment teetered on a knife edge, the collective hesitation blending with something deeper, anticipation. As he spoke those words, he felt another flicker of determination ignite within, a recognition of his purpose. The walls around him began to reshape. He was not merely defending a proposal, but becoming an integral force as the architect of a vital change. The unfolding opportunity loomed large before him. He could either channel that uncertainty into resolve or allow it to deter him. As a wave of emotion surged within him, a singular realization ignited. The moment had come to face not just the board, but his own fears head-on. Would he step forward into uncertainty, illuminating the transformative journey he so passionately envisioned, or allow that voice to dissolve into echoes of defeat? Jake knew there was no retreat now. Only the audacity to embrace the unknown awaited him. Would he step over the threshold into a new reality, or would the looming doubts pull him back into the shadows? As Jake walked into the boardroom again, a quiet sense of purpose radiated through him. No longer did he see the figures seated around the table as obstacles. Rather, they were potential allies in his quest for educational reform. This meeting wasn't just a battleground for ideas. It was a chance to prove that true education transcended metrics. As he began his presentation anew, he reminded himself that he was an advocate for his students, not just an employee fighting for numbers. He framed his words carefully, stitching together the personal stories he had gathered from his students with compelling narratives of historical figures. "Success isn't always reflected in a report card," he asserted, projecting confidence. "Think of what shapes our students, their aspirations, their struggles, and the connections they make with the material. Each student has a voice. It's time we truly hear them." Jake could see the flickers of understanding, a ripple of recognition gathering across the board members' faces. Instead of just arguing for change, he was inviting them a larger conversation about what education could represent. He shifted his focus, inviting several students to join him. With their presentations collected and organized, they stood proudly, ready to share their insights. As they began speaking, Jake watched as the students transformed before his eyes. They weren't just sharing their projects, they were telling their stories, and in lighting their passion, they kindled something profound within himself. Their voices echoed with sincerity, grounding the room in an authenticity he had fought to illustrate. Each narrative drew the board members deeper into the hearts of the students they represented. Emotions heightened, vulnerability became palpable. They moved from the realm of impersonal data to personal connections. Jake noticed Mr. Atkinson taking notes, nodding slowly, as the emotional resonance of the presentations unfolded. The shift was tangible. What had once been skepticism began to morph into curiosity. "Is this what you were advocating for, Jake?" Miss Granger inquired thoughtfully, glancing between Jake and the students. "Connecting emotional intelligence with measurable outcomes?" "Yes," Jake replied with fervor. "Education should inspire self-awareness and empathy. And if tracking emotional growth through portfolios can aid that, then we're also capturing the very essence of their learning journey." The conversation was no longer just about classroom dynamics. It had evolved into a collaborative brainstorming session. Board members began to ask questions about how Jake envisioned the implementation of formats that would allow for personal growth without sacrificing educational standards. In that moment, he felt the barriers he had once perceived start to crumble, revealing paths that had been obscured for far too long. In opening himself and his vision up to the board members, Jake found a deep, authentic connection blossoming within the room. No longer were they simply looking for numbers, they were searching for a vision that could transform their educational landscape. The meeting came to a close with commendations from the board. They had reached a consensus. A pilot program would be initiated to integrate narrative-based assessments into the curriculum. Metrics for gauging progress would be expanded to encompass emotional intelligence and engagement levels. As he left the boardroom, a wave of clarity washed over him. He had done more than advocate for change. He had exemplified it. The transformation began within him, crystallizing into solid confidence. He was not just a history teacher anymore. He had become a leader, recognized for his innovative approach and dedication to nurturing the minds and hearts of his students with validating outcomes. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the school shifted. There was a tangible sense of excitement among the faculty and students as they explored new, empathy-driven methods of learning. Jake led workshops, guiding fellow teachers in embracing the narrative approach to education, forging collaborations that would extend beyond the classroom walls. In the midst of this journey, Jake felt the rushed heartbeats of urgency give way to a steady rhythm, echoing the triumph of every student engaging with their history. He had conquered his doubts and transformed them into palpable achievements, realizing that true success lay in the networks of understanding forged between individuals. Stepping back, Jake saw how far he had come, from the confines of fear to the expansive possibilities of connection. He had pushed beyond the traditional constraints that once bound him, now anchored in his crafted story of triumph, inspiring the next generation to dream bigger than the metrics that had once confined their imaginations. Jake's journey symbolized a reclamation. His commitment to education now transformed into a legacy built on inspiration, unity, and, above all, the authentic belief that every student deserved to feel valued. Now was the moment for the audience. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support, and don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of backing this channel through these actions.